a bank of green lights behind me so I can see when all the social media feeds are in. So let's do this. LinkedIn is now live. Facebook is now live. Twitter's now live. YouTube is live. Mark, we're live. Mark, say hello to everyone.
Good morning, all. How are you?
Well, I am very, very well. Can I say that all of us on this AHDB Talking Leaders broadcast with Beanstalk Global, we're all wearing shorts. And this is the first time I've ever done a broadcast in shorts. And don't worry, you're not going to see my legs. And unless you say otherwise, you're not going to see Mark. So you're not going to see Bruce's a little bit later. So Mark, you're on the height of the event season. I know you weren't there, but you're at other places. But Cereals last week, the AHDB sponsored the two theatres, and you had a great stand there. What was the feedback from Cereals from your AHDB colleagues, please?
Yeah, no, fantastic event and a really good theatre session with lots of dialogue, lots of interactions, and yeah, just a really, really good event. And I think, to be fair, I wasn't there this year, but the weather played ball 90% of the time, and yeah, it was a good event by all.
Yeah, but I don't know about yourself and your colleagues. There's a couple of takeaways that we picked up. Lots of concerns about people. There's the shortage of people across our industries, and it'd be interesting to get the thoughts from Bruce when we get to him as well. Shortage of people. And also just the supply chain costs. It's going to be, it feels like it's going to be a good year financially for farmers for this year, next year. It's going to be 2023. It's going to be perhaps a more interesting year. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, no, I think those impacts, which there's a lot of challenges within work and within life that we're all aware of. But yeah, I think you're right that the real impacts of those aren't going to be seen until later on in this year and early to next financial year.
And we did a very good risk management broadcast with your esteemed colleague Isaac, and he managed to garner a number of cracking experts. And there's some real good takeaways about how to manage in a crisis and this supply chain crisis that we've got within farming. So if you want to have a look at that, just to get that buy-in, just Google Beanstalk Global AHDB crisis, and the broadcast will come up on the back of that. But let's not talk about crisis, Mark. Let's talk about positivity. We're loving these Talking Leaders series. The guys in my office yesterday, they were astounded as to our expert, our speaker that we've got today. So tell us, Mark, who have we got today, please?
So today we're really, really honoured to have the author, the ex-vice president of Twitter, ex-managing director of YouTube, Bruce Daisley, we're going to try and glean some of the work that he's done around eat, sleep, work, repeat, work culture, and try and find out how we can segue some of his findings, his insights, and his knowledge into the world of agriculture.
And I bet he's more handsome than you and I, which isn't going to be hard. Shall we bring him in?
Bring him in, yeah.
Bruce, come on in. Whee!
Hello there. Also wearing shorts.
Hey, dialing in from North London is Bruce in shorts. Bruce, it's fantastic to have you in. If it's okay, especially for those people dialing in on the podcast, I just want to give a real thorough groundiness to you, so everyone has that grounding, that foundation, that understanding as to who you are, especially so that they can interact with you later. Especially because we're gonna promote your book, aren't we, Bruce? We're going to promote your book, Fortitude. We're excited about that because this is the first book we promoted on the Talking Leaders series. Bruce, is that okay if I just give a bit of a background to you, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go for it. We know how important it is to be inspired by both big businesses and individuals, which is why we're really excited to present the Talking Leaders ongoing initiative from the AHDB, hosted on Beanstalk Global, which sees a series of inspirational speakers share their life experiences and deliver impactful stories to the ag leader community. And Bruce, we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's where I think the likes of Mark and his colleagues have been so good to bring individuals like you in and to get us all out of our little silo within our sectors, so that we can learn from you. So in our June broadcast, we have joining us Bruce Daisley, writer, podcaster of the critically acclaimed Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat. Bruce is a best-selling author and technology leader. He's become regarded as one of the most respected thought leaders on the subject of workplace culture and the future of work. He spent 12 years running Twitter in Europe, and previously before that, YouTube in the UK. What doesn't he know on that side? His book on improving workplace culture, Eat, Work, Repeat, Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, was the Sunday Times #1 bestseller in spring 2019. The Financial Times made it Book of the Month, and it was also shortlisted for the CMI Management Book of the Year. In his business career, Bruce was awarded greatest individual contribution to new media by New Media Age. He's been rated as the top leader in the UK tech sector by Campaign magazine and in a prestigious survey of CEOs and MDs in 2020. Bruce was again named the fantasy hire. Mark, that's never going to happen to you and I, is it? Bruce was named fantasy hire that most leaders would like to make his fourth time of winning the accolade. Other names include Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Martin Sorrell. He regularly ranks as the top-rated speaker at conferences in the US and the UK. But you would think that Bruce has got a fantastic background, a well-heeled background, farms, mansions in the past. But no, Bruce grew up in a council estate in Brum. He started his working career in fast food restaurants to help him pay his way to become the first member of his family to go to university. After dozens of rejections, Bruce landed his first career role by taking a risk and drawing a cartoon CV of his life and mailed it to 50 employers. Boom. Bruce, is that a good opening? Is that a good description of yourself, please?
Well, I mean, it certainly sounds quite boastful, but yeah, everything in there is honest and accurate. Absolutely. I mean, I should probably sort of explain how I went from working at tech companies to what I do now, which is sort of talking about and thinking about workplace culture. Shall I do that, or we're going to lead into?
No. You go for it. You go. We're going to have a lovely free flowing conversation, Bruce. So you go for it. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, look, I found myself. I'd sort of worked in, the various different backgrounds there. I had worked in magazine and publishing sector. So, I've been to pretty much every city in the UK, for example, because I used to work in local radio. And so I found myself working in that sector. I got approached to go and work at Google. And I thought, like a lot of people, oh, wow, well, the culture at Google is different to the culture anywhere else. Why? Because we go online, we search it, and it says Google's the best place to work. So I thought, oh, well, look, I'm already curious in the sort of the architecture of good teamwork. I'd love to go and see how they do it differently. And the fascinating thing for me is I went in and I worked at Google. I helped set up YouTube in the UK, which is part of Google, but the truth of it was that the culture was largely not particularly different to anywhere else I'd worked.
Wow.
Okay, that's really interesting. They'd positioned it so acutely that they do things differently, and there were some really clever parts of the mystique along the way. They would talk about how a job at Google was divided into 70% time, 20% time, and 10% time. This was part of the mythology. And just if you've never heard this 70-20-10, it was that your main job would be 70% of your working week. A project that you'd agreed with your manager would be 10% of the 20% of the week, and then you could spend 10% of your time on anything you wanted. You didn't need anyone's permission. 70-20-10. I thought, wow, this is remarkable. I can't wait to start hatching plans for what my 70-20-10 is going to look like. And once I got inside the organization, and bear in mind, this was part of the mythology. They put this in their investors document. People would ask you this on conference stages. And when I got there, I was baffled because no one was talking about 20% time. I would go out, people would say, what are you doing in your 20% time? No, and yet sort of it was this strange thing. It was like this family secret. I eventually tracked down an engineer. I said, look, what do you spend your 20% time? And he said, 20% time. Oh, that's what we call Saturday. And
oh my God.
And I realized that, the mythology and how firms talk about their culture often is a little bit like a fable. It's like something they wish that was true, but it isn't true. Anyway, I was now at Google. I was realizing that what they promised wasn't necessarily what they delivered. And it became a sort of fascination and curiosity for me then. It became like, okay, well, if that's the reality of working in a place like this, actually, what would be the secrets of creating something that did feel a bit different? And, a lot over the course of my time at Twitter, I became fascinated and fixated in these things, started doing a podcast on them, started sort of writing about them, just thinking, is there a science to creating motivated teams? Is there, we've often worked, maybe the farming community might be a touch different, but a lot of us have worked in very different environments. So we've worked in environments where, like, sometimes there's a good team rapport, and then other times you work in a place where it doesn't feel the same. And I was like, okay, what's the secret behind that? Is there some science behind creating those things? Or, from your viewers and listeners today, look, everyone hires in a competitive job market. And so, if we're going to make the jobs that we're offering to potential candidates appealing, it's worth us understanding what the mechanics are of creating team affinity, making the job appealing. So I became fixated and fascinated with those things, really.
There's so many elements on this. So we've all heard about the Google Slides, and there was a report a couple of weeks ago about a business in London that downstairs in open view near the reception, they've got the pinball machines, they've got the ping pong table, they've got the snooker table, they've got the free vending machine, but no one uses it. And a new starter said, why is no one using any of this paraphernalia, this play stuff? He asked a seasoned veteran within that business, and that person said, if you're seen to use it, you're seen not to be doing any work, and it's brought up at your appraisal. So is there a bit of greenwashing, do you think, Bruce, going on within that sort of business? And to caveat that, we're also picking up that the younger generation, when they're applying for jobs, it's not just the money that they're after, but they're after the career element. They're after mental health awareness training, financial planning training, free gym membership. Do you think we're seeing this change in the work-life culture, or is there some companies just putting in a pinball machine to make it feel good? What do you think?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different elements there, and anything you see that sort of that's created for aesthetic purposes, that I would sort of see as anything that's created for someone to pull their phone out of their pocket and take a photograph. So we used to have meeting rooms like the deck of the Starship Enterprise at Google. We used to have meeting rooms that were shaped like skiing sort of cabins that you would. What do they call them? Those chairlift cabins. We had, meeting rooms that were like double-decker buses, all manner of different things. All of it is architecture designed to get you to pull your phone out your pocket, take a photograph, and post a photograph. And what it does, it drops this gentle crumb that says it's really different to work here. It's really fun to work here. But exactly like you say, the various slides that I saw in my time working in tech firms, and all manner of spiral slides, bumpy slides, all manner of them. No one used them apart from visitors to the building. But it was a great way to frame to visitors to the building. We're not like your standard job. We're a bit different here. You don't have to be mad to work here. Of course, as the correspondent you talked about said, these things really aren't worked. And, if you do find yourself playing pinball or ping pong at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's observed, I think, by the people who see it. So, I think we've got to demystify these things. And what I ended up believing was that anything that looks like this is staging. It's like the way that you might dress a stage, for a party or an event. You're not really seeing culture there. You're seeing sort of marketing.
Yeah, there's an old potato trader that I know well who always stated to me, you need three things in life. You spend so much time in a car, have a comfortable car. You spend so much time in a bed, have a comfortable bed. You spend so much time in the office, have a nice office. And hence why he had an office on the 32nd floor Canary Wharf with great views. And Bruce, Mark, that was a potato trader, but they managed to get good rates after the last recession. But that theatre of work, I suppose it does serve a purpose, as you sort of intimate, because it catches the eye, and it's such a competitive world at the moment, trying to bring people in. But if we're going to present you with our magic wand, Bruce, what would your thoughts be to the farming community? That a farm is a farm, you could say, Mark, couldn't you? But the culture within each farm is always going to be different. Is there any sort of magic dust that you could give us, Bruce, as to how a business can develop that culture and that culture for the long term?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think most critically, thinking about the components of good workplace culture are an important consideration. So actually, if you think about what makes for a good job, and generally the things that make for a good job, people feel that they've got a voice in that business. They feel like there's a degree of affiliation, connection with the people they work with. So voice, affiliation, space, they don't feel overwhelmed by the demands upon them, and that these things are discussed. So, the most important thing I would say that if you want people to come and work for you and feel a strong sense of connection, making their feel like there's a connection between the team is probably the preeminent job. Now, you might have people who are loners, or you might have people who are more introverted working for you, who don't want too much, fuss, but trying to find a way. And it might be just, a team lunch or a team dinner or a gathering that's filled with laughter now and again. And we've often witnessed these things, but the connection that we forge between other people often is formed in really gentle ways. So, I used to work in one organization that was obsessed with internal awards. We'd always have, at the end of every year, little internal awards for all manner of things. Quite competitive, fairly tribal, sort of pitting different teams against each other. But it was a really gentle signal of togetherness, of connection, of sort of, the prioritizing fun and laughter was a really important component. So those things, I think, played a big part in trying to create a culture that felt more than people could get somewhere else. And look, the thing that's in our head all of the time is that anyone we employ, unless they're a member of our family, anyone we employ is part of a jobs market, whether we recognize it or not. And so it's down to us to try to be appealing to them and to make them feel that maybe the job that we're offering or the job we're trying to attract them to gives them something that they might struggle to get elsewhere. So I think, it's really critical for us at the moment, because understanding a very competitive job market, it's really important for us to try and understand what would be the reasons we bring people in. And I think the challenges of certainly the last few months have been that just necessarily offering a wage hasn't necessarily attracted the right candidates all of the time. So we've realized that in the jobs market, it's been a seller's market for the last 12 months, couple of years. Now, whether that continues to be the case or not, it's still, I think, the disciplines of thinking about the culture that you're creating are really critical. The one thing I'll tell you is that if anyone does sort of venture into trying to read about these things, there's a wonderful American professor called Zeynep Ton. She's a professor of operations, actually, but she's done a lot of work looking specifically at retail jobs. Look, and we might consider that's a relevant comparison. For some of the jobs we're offering, it's manual, it's in person. You can't do it remotely. So, for some of our jobs, and what she found was that offering them a good working culture, offering them good conditions, actually ended up with the organization being more profitable.
Yes.
So, a woman called Zeynep Tan, fascinating because she did a whole load of research into it. And I think quite often we can see that the architecture of trying to create good jobs might be like a first world problem. It's like, okay, I'll create good culture when I've staffed up, when I've got all the people here. And I think her discovery was that when people find a job that they think, wow, I can develop in this, or I feel enriched by this, or actually I just feel fulfilled by this in a very gentle way, they tend to stay in it longer. They tend to develop some loyalty to it. So these things actually might feel like first world problems, but if we're going to build sustainable businesses, they're actually quite critical to our success.
Totally, Bruce, and it segues in really, really well with a broadcast that we ran about a month ago for Ag Leadership Week, because there's a number of groups, including the AHDB, Bruce, that want to promote development, personal development and training within the ag sector, because we're lagging behind other sectors. And I think I said, Mark, in that broadcast that there's a standard Cranfield University graph showing that the companies that put more training and development into the team see better turnover, better profitability, and better staff retention. But Mark, just to get your input, because we sort of have to educate Bruce as to the oddity of our sectors, that with some of our farmers that and that I will know, there's 3 generations within that business. You can have a grandfather, a father, and a son in his 20s coming through, and to change the culture, to change things that may have always been done in a certain way, to change them because they need to be changed to attract and to retain colleagues, teams within a farm is pretty difficult. Mark, what would be your advice as to how, from what we're learning from Bruce, as to how we can keep that culture or change that culture in a positive way on a farming perspective?
I think those points that you made, Max, and it's really, really difficult with that generational piece where you've got generational habits. Breaking those and making change to those is massively different. But I suppose I'm no expert and no person to provide any guidance or advice. But I suppose it's not eating the cake in one bite. It's trying to focus on small steps and making change very, very slow. Well, not slowly, but just in little manageable chunks.
And Bruce, just to give you a real oddity, milkers. Mark is a fantastic dairyman of old, and still keeps his hand in milking one of the best herds in England on a part-time basis when he's called upon. We got involved with my recruitment hat on with a big global producer of automatic robotic milkers. So at the moment, a man or lady has to go in and physically milk cows with automation, but 2 or 3 times a day. These automatic robotic milkers milk the cows for you. And so this company thought that, well, they've got the solution. Everyone will be able to enjoy farming and not actually have to do the physicality of milking the cows 2-3 times a day. When they went to present this technology into Ireland, what they found was that most dairy farmers there didn't want to adopt the technology because they like milking cows. And one guy's been milking cows for 24 years without having a day off. And they were saying, well, if you actually stopped and used one of these robots, you might meet a wife rather than milking the cow. So there's a real cultural change. So Bruce, would you agree with Mark that you can't come in overnight? A lot of the businesses that we're associated within ag have been going for a number of years. So it's not like a new startup where you can change and mold things very, very quickly. So do you think that would be the answer, that if there's a younger generation coming through within ag and they know they want to change, but they've got to change the team they've got, but they've also got to change the management / the family. So is it bite-sized chunks, but little bite-sized bits that you go out to try and change that culture? What do you think, Bruce?
I mean, look, it's fascinating. Our relationship with change is fascinating because one of the things that we do know, for example, is that technology has intruded into the way we work, whether we like it or not. And specifically, whether we like it or not, we all now have email on our phones, right? Or we all have some means of people contacting us in our pockets that we never had. So whether that's just a phone call or a WhatsApp or an email, but we all have a means of someone getting in touch with us that we didn't have before. And when we look into the impact of that, it seems that in the last 15 years, the average working day has gone up by 2 hours a day because, casually you might be out, you might be out on a visit, and all of a sudden now you can take a phone call, you can answer an email, and as a consequence, you probably glance at those things a bit earlier in the morning than you did before. So we know that technology has expanded the day, and I think probably it's a fair question that a lot of organizations have posed in the last couple of years. They've said, okay, we've created that adaptation. We've said, okay, we don't necessarily, we've sort of worked in a more flexible way. And I guess the question that has now developed is people have said, okay, well, now I've got that technology, does it enable me to maybe work from somewhere that isn't my allocated desk in an office every day of the week, and bring some flexibility in there? So I think there's a quid pro quo. It's really interesting what you say about habits, though. One of the debates, certainly in the wider world of work, is about moving to a 4-day week. Now, specifically, this is that when you work with your mind and you're focusing on trying to solve problems, what we're witnessing is that people are spending so much time connected to their devices that they feel spent. They're not coming up with the original ideas. They're not coming up with the sort of the insight, the problem solving that maybe they should. And so there's a debate saying, could people be more productive if they worked intensely for 4 days rather than over 5 days? But there was one Australian bank that tried this out, and I was really fascinated to see their experience. This Australian bank tried it out, so very intently. They said, we're going to measure the productivity of the team. If the productivity stays the same, we're going down to a 4-day week. Anyway, of the people who worked at the organisation, half of the organisation didn't tell their partners they'd gone down to a 4-day week. And so I can only sort of vividly imagine the scene that on a Friday morning, they would grab their newspaper, they'd wave goodbye to her indoors, and they'd set off for another busy day at the office. Little did their partners know that they were off to have a big lunch, bit of golf in the morning, lunch in the afternoon. They didn't tell their partners. So habits definitely define a big part of how we do our jobs.
Excellent. And just go back to that point that you mentioned earlier about we're just so busy. I mentioned this in a previous broadcast, and a number of people contacted me on the back of it. That again, I think it was from Cranfield, that the better businesses, the better business leaders are those that can spend 20 to 25% of their working time just thinking. Just thinking, coming up with solutions, looking at the, and that's an issue with the sectors that Mark and I are involved with, because it's just so busy and so frenetic, and even more so with modern technology, that no one has any time to actually stop and think. So to be able to have that ability to stop and think and to come up with solutions and new strategies and ways to go is obviously a great way to go. And just on that side, Bruce, what would you, for a leader who does want to create that change within the organization, and I was talking about little baby bite-sized chunks to get the process going, what would you recommend the first thing they should be looking to do to create that cultural change within the business? What's the first bit you would say would be worthwhile deploying?
Normally, most of us feel like when we enter a new thing, so whether it's we enter a sports team or we enter a club or association, we want to feel like our voice is heard. And quite often, we encounter this, we encountered it in school project teams, whatever. If you speak up and you feel that your voice isn't listened to, then there's a learning experience from that. And you speak up, you might, in this situation, you might say to the person who's your manager or to the person who sort of runs the organization, you might say, you know what, we've been doing something this way, and I think there's a better way of doing it. And if the first time you speak up and say that, you're shouted down, generally that's a learning experience and you don't do it again. And so an interesting lesson for us might be, okay, how do we enable people to have a voice in this organization? How do we enable, often there's no one better to understand how we could improve our billing process than the people who do billing. There's no one better to understand how we could do some aspects of our product delivery than the people who are responsible for it, and demonstrating to them that their voice and their input matters is one of the best ways to increase their engagement. Now, look, an extension of that might be you actually give them some incentive to do it. But what you find is the incentive is actually less important than the contribution. We all want to feel like we can make a contribution and it will be noticed. And, sometimes we make the mistake of saying, let's incentivize it, put a target on it. No. First and foremost, if people feel like their voice is heard, then it's incredibly meaningful. So that's what I would say, really. Think about, how could I hear some of the quieter voices in the organization? If I was going to listen to some of the voices I don't listen to, number one, why am I not listening to them right now? And, there might be a reason in our heads where we think, oh, what do they know about it? They've shown no initiative. Okay, well, is there a way to try and nurture an early sense of initiative? But, giving people a voice in an organization is a really critical part of making them feel invested in it. There's an organization called Gallup who for years and years did opinion polls, but now really focus on workplace research. And they published some astonishing data. So they published, just last week, they published their latest cut of data on workplace engagement. They say 8%, the single digit 8% of British workers are engaged in our jobs. Now, what do they mean by this? They mean like are actively energized, connected, have got a desire to make our business succeed. There's about 3 times more members of the workforce who are actively disengaged in their jobs than are engaged in it. So anytime you see like a public transport going past or a queue of people driving to work, there's 3 times as many people in that queue of traffic who are going to work to bring about the downfall of their organization. 3 times as many of them than there are people. Now, really interesting. If you ask, okay, Gallup, who do this work, okay, what could we do to make people feel more engaged in their job? Give them a sense of voice, make them feel like their contribution matters, make them feel like their workload is something that they can handle. These are really gentle things. But I think so often we're presented with workers who either through circumstance or through the way that we've engineered it, don't feel connected by our jobs. And, you know, I'm convinced that's not the natural order of things. People want to do a good job. People have, you know, if you go into a supermarket, the people in there are not heading to work that day intent on bringing misery to everyone who encounters them. But we need to engineer the work so that they feel connected to it, actually proud of doing it. You know, innately, I think we do get this sort of a nice reciprocated benefit of feeling like we've done a good job for someone. We just try and need to nurture that a little.
And just talking and nurturing, I've got to give you my best story of that, because I love what you say about giving that voice. There's a company not a million miles away from where I am in Suffolk, and when it was about 10 years ago, they deliver a lot of food service, so of products. So about 10 years ago, there was the new law that came in that when you reverse a truck, it's got the beep, 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 beep on it. And the old guard didn't want these beep, beep, beeps because they just thought that was immoral. Well, they're such fantastic drivers. Why do we need the beep, beep, beeps? And the boss was told that the drivers didn't want these beep, beep, beeps. And the boss said, well, sack them all. And the driver said, well, we're going to leave. And then there was a lovely receptionist came up with a great idea. Turned out the lead protagonist of these lorry drivers was big into Shaking Stevens. And it turned out that the sound of the beep, beep, beep fitted in with the Shaking Stevens truck. She started to film these guys dancing to the beep, beep, beep. Right. Video went viral locally, and all the new drivers that came in, the old guard were then showing the new guard how to dance to the beep, beep, beeps. And it was all sorted. Everyone was happy. So talk about positive manipulation. But yeah, it's just trying to get people out of that rut. And again, Mark, you and I know enough. I was going to say war weary, but really hardened farm workers who've always said it's always been done this way. Why do I need this new technology on this tractor? Why do I need this new technology in the milking parlor? But Mark, do you think just giving them that voice, giving them that opportunity to announce, actually, we should be using this, we should be adopting it rather than forcing it on them? Mark, do you think that's a good way to go?
Yeah, no, definitely think that's a good way to go, and just providing that bit of voice which traditionally wouldn't have been done within an organisation. And we could be talking about businesses, like you say, that are family operations. It's mother, father, son and daughter, and then one full-time equivalent that they employ, that they would have never thought about asking Fred or Sarah that's been there for 50 years about their opinions and where they can go. So yeah, definitely something that we need to try and push ourselves out of our comfort zone and do.
And so, Bruce, you were mentioning with the businesses that you've been in, that you've seen the slides, and presumably you've also been inflicted with the Outlook calendar meetings or the Teams meetings. And there's some businesses that we know, if you just want to have a career having meetings, that's all that business does. What's your thoughts? What's your recommendations, Bruce, as to how we can? I've heard people talk about the likes of the golden thread, that everyone knows that the end goal here is to have a fantastic harvest, or if it's a new business, say making cider or gin, that the end goal is to sell out 4 years down the line and everyone's going to benefit, and everything that we talk about has got to be on this golden thread going to that end goal, which is a bit jingoistic, but it's quite good, because at meetings they say, is this on the golden thread? Do we need to go to that show? Do we need to this piece of equipment? Bruce, have you got any tips as to, such a big question, for businesses, whether they be second, third generation farms or new startups within our sectors, as to the direction of travel, to keep them going in that direction of travel, to keep everyone on the journey and not to lose them? What would your advice be on that, please, Bruce?
Yeah, I think, it's look, I think you express there the real benefit when these things work well. And of course, all of us Brits by our very nature have got a certain layer of cynicism. And so when we witness something and we think it's performative or we don't think it's real, we get a bit cautious about it. It's like, do I need to buy into this just to look like I buy into it? Or do I buy into this because actually there's a sense that we're all contributing to this? So, it's back to what I said before. If you feel like you've got if your opinion's valued, if when it comes to with regard to your angle, sort of the golden thread, if it's like, okay, every time everyone in the team makes a suggestion, a contribution, actually it's taken on board and we're getting better. And if we look at how we do things versus how we did things last year, these 20 changes that the team have initiated, that have made us better. Now, all of these things, I think, do work in service to us thinking, yeah, we're all part of something here. We're all, great cultures have a sense that we're all in it together. And there's really interesting evidence on that. If you look into organizations, some work that I saw done in a variety of different sectors that included farm workers, but retail workers, hospital workers. And they asked people, when you think about your team, do you talk about us or do you talk about them? When you think about your manager, do you regard them as a good example of the sort of person who works here, or do you regard them as very different? Now, when people answer those questions with an inclusive sense of, we're all in this together, we're all we, their stress levels are lower, their levels of engagement in their job are higher. And that's like an interesting focus. So, there might well be times where you've talked about generational shifts, or there might well be times where, maybe these different categories of workers, these people who are, office workers, these people who are out in the fields or are doing sort of far more manual related jobs. If we can try to create a sense that we're all in this together, and there might be different tribes within that, but we can try and create a sense that actually, we've all got the same objectives in mind, that it tends to be in service of us feeling like we've created something bigger. And now that might be that you recognize we're going to have 3 or 4 different cultures here. The people who work in the office are going to have a different culture, almost intentionally, than the people who work and do far more manual work. But we want each of those different cultures, each of those different tribes, to feel connected to each other. Those things generally don't happen by accident. So, if you chatted to some of those workers and you said to them, in a year's time, our team culture will be better, what 3 things will we have done to have made it better? So you're sort of inviting them to do a bit of imaginative thinking. If the culture here was going to be better in a year's time, what would we have done? Almost without exception, they'll tell you 2 or 3 things. So people are not having these sort of denying these thoughts to themselves. They know that, if our manager was a bit more like this, if, the people we work with were a bit more like this, if there was, if people listen to what we suggested, they know the suggestions. And so it's just getting yourself into the rhythm of saying, okay, I'm going to ask them, what would we need to do to make it better? And, I'm going to action some of those things. So if they tell me it's a clearer way to, one of the things people who do jobs like that is like a clearer way to swap a shift with someone, right? It might feel, completely irrelevant to us, but these days, if they can swap a shift on an app, if they can get their phone out and swap a shift, it's a huge game changer for the people who do jobs where they're expected to be in a certain place at a certain time. So these things might not feel big to us, but in terms of the mechanics of building a good job for those people, they can be game changing. So then it's like, okay, right, I hadn't thought about that. What can I do now to build in something that enables them to change the shift on a Sunday night at a tap of their phone? Really simple stuff that exists out there, but that would be in service of trying to make them feel like they're part of something that feels different to what they were part of before.
Excellent, Bruce. Well done. I've just had a question in from a mate, from a contact on WhatsApp. Are there a couple of companies that Bruce would recommend that have got great and genuine cultures that we can follow? This individual, he works on the basis of plagiarization, that he sees people who've done the hard miles and looks to adapt what they've done into his business. So are there a couple of businesses that you think have genuinely got that magic dust within the business culturally?
Yeah, there are. The woman I recommended before, Zainab Tan, she's done a whole book on this, which is like, which is retail store cultures. I think there's an applicability to that, because in retail stores, you've got the office workers, you've got the people on the, taking deliveries, stacking shelves, you've got these are sort of a range of different jobs. And she goes through them line by line. She goes through one company called Quick Trip. So her book, I think costs you about £9. It's called The Good Job Strategy. Brilliant, truly brilliant book, because she goes through and she says, actually, these probably 4 decisions that organizations make that determine what the experience of a job is like. There's some of these things, like, in a retail store, in a supermarket, it's a bit like if someone asks you, where's the pasta? Do does your server point past us down there on the left, or do they walk you there?
Yeah.
You don't think that's a decision that they make. There's a decision that some stores point and some stores walk you, or some stores have a big range, some stores have a small range. But these things we don't think about, but they have a big impact on what the experience of the job is like. Really interesting, fascinating, sort of deconstructing the job to these critical parts. But you talked about one organization called Quick Trip, and Quick Trip, really interestingly, pay way ahead of the market. They pay 50% more than the industry average for retail workers, for supermarket workers. So, really lumpy. But the reason why they do that is because their workers are incredibly loyal. They stay there longer. There's sort of a team connection, so they get far more out of them for that extra money. Really fascinating. But one of the things I mentioned before, there's a quotation in her book where she talks about the culture there, and the vice president of operations there, American business, vice president of operations there, says the reason why people stay at Quick Trip isn't the money. It's because they know their manager will do any job that they are asked to do.
Oh, yeah, well done.
There's something about that. We're all in this together. And so, some of this is the managers will clean the toilets, right? Yeah. They've never worked in somewhere where the manager would clean the toilets. But because of that, it creates this sense that we're all in this together. It's not just like us and them. We're trying to build something. Now, whether that's exactly right for all of us and for all the things we're trying to do, but as a thought experiment, it's really fascinating. It's like, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that, So you might have one extreme, an organization who's cosmetically talking about the golden thread. It's like, everyone does it. Does it make the boat go faster? Does this decision improve? And then in parallel, you've got an organization that just through 2 or 3 behaviors, 2 or 3 actions, people think, oh, no. The reason why I work here is because, when Sid didn't turn up for his shift, the manager went out and did the shift. And it's sort of, in terms of creating something that feels special, it's transformational. So that book, Zeynep Ton's The Good Job Strategy, £8 or something, £9 on Amazon. Fascinating read, and you'll get through it. It's a fascinating read, thinking about the little things that we can all do to make our business slightly more effective.
There's a large food company that I won't name, but one of their units employed about 200 people, had a huge staff retention problem. And the overall CEO went to that site to see what the issue was. And he called all of the workers to come upstairs to the boardroom, and the workers wouldn't go upstairs. And he asked them, well, why won't you go upstairs? Because we're not allowed upstairs. Right. Some of us have been here 10 years and we're not allowed to go upstairs. And he said, sod that, you're all coming upstairs. And he found out that there was this ivory tower scenario. And you can imagine the movement that then happened at that senior level. And Bruce, I love that about the likes of the worker, just showing everyone else that the manager will happily do any role within there. And just segueing into that, another question in on WhatsApp. As Bruce is probably picking up, we've got a real issue in holding on to staff and also attracting staff. We run a large farming and contracting business. We don't have a website. Do you think, does Bruce think that we need a website to attract and retain people to come and work for us, Bruce?
So look, I think increasingly we are inclined that when you hear about an organization, you'll think, okay, I want to check them out. I want to look at what the experience is like. So, largely businesses from pubs to pet stores to painters, people have a website now. Look, it'll cost you. I built a website for my new book. I got someone to do it for me. Probably all in cost me 500 quid. So, these things aren't huge investments, but probably far more is thinking about what the job experience looks like. And, when it comes to attracting and retaining staff, the question has to be, firstly, how are you looking at this? The real reason why that Good Job Strategy book is so fascinating is that quite often we can find ourselves, and retail again is a good comparison. Retail, we hear about 0 hours contract. We hear about, organizations where it's such a buyer's market for labor that they just pay the minimum wage, and they can know that they can get staff all the time. And what Zeynep Ton discovered was that organizations who say, no, we're going to pay more, but we're going to make the job feel like it's a place you can develop, you You
Brilliant.
can build a career, you can build a life here, you can stay here for a long time. They paid more, but they got the benefit for doing that. So what Zeynep Tom found is that these organizations were more profitable, they were more sustainably high growing. And I think it's like a conscious decision. It's like, okay, rather than I just want to bring people in and what's the rate I need to pay right now? How can you build careers for people? When I really interestingly, I used to, you mentioned at the outset, I worked in fast food a lot. And the really interesting thing there was that there was a lot of people in fast food in comparison, and I'm going to compare it side by side with like warehouse workers for Amazon or whatever. So you work for an Amazon warehouse job. There's no career, no development. You can never go from the shop floor to the management. Never. You can't do that. It's not in the setup. When you work in fast food, it's incredibly open. It's incredibly democratic. It's sort of meritocratic in the sense that frequently you work with people in McDonald's stores or in Burger King stores who've maybe left school with no qualifications, but have got just an incredible work ethic. I work with people in Burger King who were working 80 hours a week. Then they became managers there. Then they became regional managers there. And, it gave people who maybe had been left a little bit to hung out to dry by the education system. It gave these people an opportunity to thrive and to succeed. It was extraordinary to watch. I was there sort of, working far more like a lot of the people who are sort of part of my education, funding my education. But these people just show you an incredible desire to succeed. And what you get from it is that, okay, they felt like they had a stake in this. They felt like they were part of a system where if they worked really hard, they could get on, they could develop, they could, maybe aspire to buy a car, buy a flat. And so, I think it's a really critical component. Are we creating a job where we just want to pay minimum wage and bring staff in and we're losing people all the time? Or are we creating careers for people? And that might mean we've got to give a little bit of ourselves a bit more. Yeah. We've got to think about, the architecture of the job, of what the career would look like. But based on Zeynep Tom's work, that ultimately turns out to be more profitable.
Mark, that's fantastic, isn't it? I asked Bruce as to whether my contact should have a website, and we just had a complete fantastic professional seminar on how to change the culture within your business. But it's so important, isn't it? Yeah, have the website, but have everything else alongside it. And promise, and don't be jingoistic, that people coming into your farming business or your supply business, there will be a career here for you. We'll give you everything you need, but we want you to work hard, but there will be a career for you. Mark, do you agree?
Yeah, no, I hugely agree. And it's those really interesting points. And I haven't really thought about the McDonald's and the Burger King model in terms of the day you start as the Saturday boy or girl, that actually gaining stars and credits is to try and get you to that management position with the managing the store. And that's, I think, something that the industry needs to think about. And rather than employing someone to come in and plough the field or to manage the cows, to actually think about how the role and the career within that farm can be expanded, so that they're not just doing that role, that they can actually grow and develop. And then there's a lot of people which, if you think about training and developing and this kind of stuff, go, well, yeah, but then they leave. I've invested X number of thousands of pounds in that person, and then they leave. But is that really a bad thing? No, developing someone to push forward within their career should be deemed as a positive and should be deemed as a success within that business, to then create you as the employer of choice kind of thing, because you're enabling that development rather than just paying someone to plough the field or milk the cows.
Yeah, and what's the expression, Mark? Bruce, we will come back to you in a minute. We haven't forgot about you. It's like train the trainer, isn't it? That's you can bring that new individual in, and they're then looking after the younger generation or the casual staff. They'll then get that management experience. Because Bruce, that's the whole issue about this, isn't it? That you can't go off and do a degree, an MBA in creating this positive culture within a business. In some ways, you've either got to learn on the job, or Bruce, learn from the likes of you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a really interesting thing, because just as Mark was talking about there, you're obviously going to have some potential employees who the idea of their job becoming complicated or developing, or suddenly they're running a little profit center. That's not what they want. Like the job for them is freedom, the great outdoors. It's like not having to be constantly tied to an inbox. So there's a bit of job design which is going to appeal to some people and not to others. On the flip side, you're going to have people who, if they feel like they're getting better, if they feel like they're developing and improving, it's going to be a huge motivator for them. So, like they're doing this training, and the training has given them access to maybe earning a bit more money and a bit more responsibility, and they're developing. And so, if you asked someone about how they felt the job was going, they'd say, I'm loving working here. I'm improving, and we've just hired someone to do my old job. So I think, look, there's going to be different needs for different situations, but I think, thinking probably the end point is we're frustrated that we keep losing people. Why are we losing people? Do we need a website? What are we doing wrong? And I guess the critical thing is probably thinking, right, okay, if I wanted people to feel that this is a good place to build a career, but a good place to spend 10 years of their life rather than one summer of their life, how would I set about doing that? And, sort of posing those questions to ourselves, really.
I love that thinking. Guys, I'm starting to run out of time. Bruce, tell us about Fortitude. Tell us about your new book, Fortitude, please.
Yeah, so I've written a book which is about how resilience is a toxic myth. Resilience is this sort of strange thing that we hear all the time. I was listening to the radio 2 days running last week, and 2 interviews in a row, both days, both talked about resilience. We need to be more resilient. Time for people to be more resilient. You hear it everywhere. And it's like really fascinating when you deconstruct what is being asked in those situations. Quite often, we want people to be resilient, meaning we just want them to go off and deal with whatever problem that has befallen them. And it's a really strange thing. So, what we've seen is that schools now, if anyone listening to this has got kids, I am certain their school offers a resilience training course to them. Or, organizations, big companies who are suffering massive amounts of burnout in their employees. They are, there's a sort of a boom market for resilience training courses. And the interesting thing about them is that if you chat to people who go on those courses, they whisper it. They say, I don't feel any different to how I did before. And worse, my manager told me when I was reporting feeling burnt out, my manager was saying, you need to go on a resilience course. Now I've been on the resilience course. It's a bit like, am I broken? Am I like, are they going to get rid of me? Am I sort of the toy in Toy Story who's about to be discarded out into the,
God, Bruce.
into the street? No. What you find is this, the interesting thing is this, immerse myself sort of writing the book for the last couple of years.
Hold it up, Bruce. Hold it up, Bruce. Hold it up. Thank you. Fortitude, unlocking the secrets of inner strength. Go on, keep going, Bruce.
And here's the amazing thing is that, so for all me pouring scorn on all of these sort of versions of resilience that we've tried and we've found that courses don't seem to access. Despite all of that, let's be fundamentally true. Do we see examples of resilience around us? Well, look at people in Ukraine right now. Oh my God, it's like the most awe-inspiring resilience to the extent that we feel fearful. If someone said to you, you've got to, send the women and kids away, and now you've got to go and take up arms. The sort of the inner coward in us thinks, I'm not sure I could do that. That's like, but what you find is that resilience, there's a clue really vividly in that. Resilience is a collective strength. Yeah. The times you see resilience is that when people feel supported and reflected in the people around them, they feel like, yeah, we're going to do this. And, we see this really vividly in the aftermath of natural disasters, where you'd expect people would be sort of forlornly crying in the streets. And yet people sort of gathered and organized in this really inspiring way, or like in that war in Ukraine. Resilience is a collective response to adversity. Now, as soon as you know that, then you think, yeah, well, maybe that explains why kids have been feeling a bit less resilient, because they've been stuck at home doing home learning for a few months, or they haven't connected with their friends in the same way. Or you've got employees for some organizations saying, yeah. Because they're feeling resilient. They're sitting in, at their kitchen table doing Zoom calls all day. They feel like they haven't laughed with someone, they haven't been seen any sort of interaction with them. Resilience is a collective strength, not an individual strength. And once you recognize that, you start seeing all of these examples of, oh, that's now it's so self-evident. You know, it's why sort of football fans sort of singing together have just got this sort of this emboldened affinity connection with each other. Or you sort of witness why religions around the world have always gathered people and always got them to sing together because they feel strengthened by that. And as soon as you see it, it's like, wow, well, why don't we teach that? Why is that not the thing that's taught to kids in school? Why is that not the thing that taught to workers in organizations? So anyway, that's what I've done. That's what I've written. I spent sort of the last 6 months since it's been written, sort of getting it in the hands of people I really respect. And I've got some wonderful endorsements on it. So yeah, it's available for pre-order now.
And where can we get it? The normal places?
Yeah. I mean,
Amazon.
if you want to support your local bookshop, then you can order it there. But it's available in all places. Support your local bookshop if you get a chance.
Again, Mark, just segueing. I'm just thinking of Bruce. We've got our UK Harvest coming up, and it's a frenetic time, and everyone wants to be careful during it. But there's a lot of overtime, some jeopardy in the respects of the weather. Mark, I don't think I've ever been involved with a business that actually sits down with everyone and says, right, this is Harvest coming up. We've all got to be here together. We're going to have strengths and negatives. There's going to be ups and downs, but we're all going to be here for each other. Mark, do you think that would work within UK agriculture if it's presented right, or would that come across a bit jingoistic? I'm just thinking of looking to create that cultural change with some of these businesses that we often talk about.
I absolutely think it would work, and it's just that whole mindset piece of flipping something that, yes, you need to harvest the corn when the sun's shining, and you need to potentially do 150 hours a week, which is the reality of the UK harvest. But flipping it, gathering the team of individuals together, or the contractor, whoever you're using, and saying, kind of, we're in this together. If Sarah don't feel too great that day and needs a bit of time off, then we'll work around it and cover each other. I think it's definitely, it's that whole mindset piece of looking at it from the other side of the spectrum.
I did a season hop picking in Kent in my youth. And it's really interesting, sort of, it's a fairly small season. It was probably 6 weeks or something, I think. But it's really interesting that, there was this mystical discussion. I don't think it was a vintage year for the crop that year, but there was a discussion amongst like a few of the regulars there who said, oh yeah, last 2 years we've had a bonus. We've had a hop bonus. And so like it became this mythical thing. How do we access the bonus? Do we work harder? Do we access the bonus? And we never got the bonus in the end, but no one had ever told us what we needed to do to get the bonus. And like, so we were sort of, do we need to load the threshing machine quicker? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to, like, there was some Polish workers alongside us and they were like, don't do it quicker. Don't do it quicker. You do it this way. We've seen this before. Don't do it quicker. We'll get another 2 or 3 days work if you don't do it quicker. We were sort of loading 8 vines onto the threshing machine each time. They were loading 1 or 2. If someone had said to us, I tell you what, like, here's the plan. Here's how you can do it. Here's the reward you're going to get. Actually, there's a bit of food and drink laid on for you. Like, if there'd just been some effort, I think we'd have felt more connected. As it was a very pronounced us and them environment. Someone would spin round on his quad bike and shout some instructions at us twice a day. And as a result, it definitely could have something of a bit more in it together could have been orchestrated, I'm sure.
Guys, my contact who was asking about the website, he says, I'm really embarrassed to have asked about the website now. I've got to change the culture within my business. Bruce is fantastic. I've pre-ordered Fortitude and I'm also looking out to buy Quick Job Strategy. Thank you very much to Bruce and Mark. So there you go.
Yeah, fantastic.
Mark, would you like to wrap up for us, please?
Yeah, no, thank you, Max. And Bruce, thank you. What a pleasure. And we've gone from new ways of working to culture, into managing and attracting staff into the industry, and hopefully we can segue a few of your insights. But I suppose the last closing point, and what would be a couple of nuggets that you would share with UK farmers to try and push ourselves forward in a couple of those areas? Bruce,
I think probably just taking a moment to empathise with what the lived experience of some of our workers are. It's very easy for us sometimes to be frustrated with the, our office team might be demanding to work from home, or our team out in the field might be showing sort of less initiative than we want. And I guess the question that we might ask is, do we think they could work somewhere else and surprise us with what they achieved? Sometimes you see someone who leaves and you're like, 5 years on, you're like, I can't believe that guy's doing that. They've blown you away. And I used to ask myself all the time, if 100 people were doing my job, who would be like the top one or two? Who would achieve those results that you're like, I can't believe with that they've achieved that? And it forces you to think, what are the little casual decisions I'm making along the way that maybe are sort of holding people back? Are there things that I could, and look, we shouldn't expect to do a lot of things. Are there one or two little things that maybe would enable people to feel like they have got a bit more of a say in things? Or, if I was to say that simple exercise, in a year's time, the culture here will be better. What would we have done to do that? And just listen to the answers. Now, it might be you get 50 answers and you're like, I don't want to do any of those things. And that is that's your prerogative. No one's forcing you. But you might be like, actually, if I did 3 of these things, it might be like where the parking is. It might be something so trivial. But if I did 3 of these things, that's interesting. Let's see what happens if I do 3 of those things. Because then people might think, oh, it's like things are changing a bit. Things are getting a bit better around here. So that's what I would say. Incrementalism, don't necessarily feel like you've got to bring a revolution straight away, but making little incremental changes might help.
Wow.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Everyone, when we did the brief on this broadcast with Bruce 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, we said we want everyone to learn 5 things from you, Bruce. I think we've exceeded that somewhat, Mark, haven't we? I think we're well over a dozen.
Absolutely, most definitely.
So, Mark, Bruce, thank you. That was an absolute stormer. And just to say again, because we Mark and I haven't promoted a book, go out and get Fortitude by Bruce Daisley. Bruce, you've been fantastic. I suspect we're going to see you again, because what we tend to find is that people like yourself get picked up within our circuit, within our community, because we just need that fresh thinking in to make that difference. And what's great is that you've managed to narrate it, present everything in a really not simplified, but a very practical manner that I think we can all take from and add to make our businesses better. Mark, over to you to wrap up.
No, brilliant. And again, Bruce, thank you very much. Again, I don't think you're going to be a shy face to the world of UK agriculture as we move forward. We're in that massive change element, and all these kind of nuggets are definitely going to be applied. Thank you very much. Buy the book. I've pre-ordered my copy already, which is grand. And thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
I'm sorry, Mark, I've just had a WhatsApp in. There's a contact of mine who runs a hop farm in Kent. What are you doing this summer, Bruce?
Listen, people get in touch with me. I'm always willing, especially if they're going to pre-order some books, I'm always willing to chat. So get in touch. You can, if you go to findfortitude.net, you'll find a lot of the stuff there.
I will link you on the various posts. Bruce, thank you. Mark, thank you. And we'll catch up at the next AHDB Talking Leaders hosted with us, Beanstalk Global. Bruce, thank you. Mark, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.